The lawyer pushed the folder toward me and said, "I'm sorry, Claire. Your parents left you nothing." I stared at the will, waiting for the sentence to somehow change. Then he added, "Your cousin Daniel received the entire estate." I didn't cry. I simply looked at the final page and whispered, "Then I know exactly what I have to do." My name is Claire Morgan, and for most of my life, I believed being a good daughter meant being there whenever my parents needed me. My parents, Robert and Elaine, were both in their early 70s. They lived in the same quiet town where I had grown up, in a 2-story house with a huge backyard and an old garage my father had turned into a workshop. I was their daughter. Daniel was my cousin. And somehow, when everything was over, Daniel was the one sitting where I thought I belonged. The lawyer's name was Michael Harris. He was calm, professional, and careful with his words. He opened the folder again. "Your parents' will was updated 8 months before your mother's death." I frowned. "Updated?" "Yes." "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Michael looked uncomfortable. "Because you weren't included in the discussion." That sentence hit harder than the will itself. I had spent years helping my parents. When Dad needed surgery, I drove him to every appointment. When Mom broke her wrist, I stayed at their house for 3 weeks. I paid bills when they were confused by online banking. I fixed their insurance paperwork. I even took time off work when Dad's workshop flooded. Daniel rarely visited. He lived 3 hours away and always seemed too busy. Yet according to the will, he received the house, my father's workshop, their savings, and almost everything else. I received an old wooden box. That was it. Michael slid it across the desk. "Your mother specifically listed this for you." I opened it. Inside were photographs, a few letters, and an old silver watch that had belonged to my grandfather. I almost laughed. "So Daniel gets everything, and I get Dad's old watch?" Michael didn't answer. I looked at him. "There has to be a reason." "There is." My heart started beating faster. "What is it?" He folded his hands. "Your father asked me to give you this envelope only after the will was officially read." He placed a sealed envelope on the table. My name was written across it in my father's handwriting. I knew that handwriting immediately. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was short. "Claire. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably angry. You have every right to be. But please don't judge me until you understand what happened. The house was never the real inheritance. Look beneath the 3rd floorboard in my workshop. Trust no one until you find what I left there. Dad." I read it twice. Then a 3rd time. Michael watched me carefully. "Did you know about this?" "No," he said. "Did Daniel?" "I don't know." I stood up. For the first time that afternoon, I felt something other than hurt. I felt curiosity. And I had no idea how dangerous that curiosity would become. The next morning, I went to my parents' house. Daniel was already there. He stood in the kitchen holding a box of my father's tools. When he saw me, his expression changed. "Claire." "Daniel." He gave me an awkward smile. "You came for the watch?" I looked at him. "No." His smile disappeared. "I came for something Dad left in the workshop." His face became strangely still. "What?" I didn't answer. I walked past him. The workshop smelled exactly as it had when I was a child. Wood. Oil. Dust. And my father's old coffee. I stood there remembering him teaching me how to use a screwdriver when I was 10. Then I found the 3rd floorboard. It looked ordinary. I lifted it. Nothing. For a moment, I thought the letter had been some cruel final joke. Then I noticed a tiny metal latch beneath the board. I pulled it. A narrow compartment opened. Inside was a black folder. And that folder changed everything. It contained bank statements. property records, business documents, and copies of several transfers made over the previous 5 years. Money had been leaving my parents' accounts. Thousands at a time. All going to one company. A company called Northbridge Consulting. I had never heard of it. But there was something else. My father's notes were written beside several transactions. Daniel. My stomach dropped. Daniel had been taking money from my parents. Not once. Not twice. 4 years. I kept reading. The total was over $240,000. I sat on the workshop floor in shock. Daniel had told everyone he was struggling financially. My parents had apparently been secretly supporting him. But why would they leave him everything? Then I found the final document. It was a contract. My parents had loaned Daniel money to start a business. The business had failed. Daniel owed them nearly $300,000. And according to the contract, the debt would be forgiven if he inherited the property. I stared at the page. Suddenly, the will made sense. Daniel wasn't receiving everything because they loved him more. He was receiving everything because my parents had created a deal to erase his debt. But there was another page. And that was the real shock. It was signed by my mother. The document stated that the property would be transferred to Daniel only if he completed a specific condition. He had to repay a separate private loan within 12 months. If he failed, ownership would return to the estate. I read the clause again. Then I smiled. Because I knew Daniel had no idea. Or at least, I hoped he didn't. I took copies of everything to Michael. He studied the documents for nearly 20 minutes. Finally, he looked up. Claire, this changes the situation. How? The will gives him the property. I nodded. But this agreement creates a separate obligation. So? So if Daniel doesn't fulfill the condition, he may not actually keep what he inherited. I sat back. For the first time since my parents died, I felt hope. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth. So I stayed quiet. I didn't confront Daniel. I didn't tell him what I had found. I simply waited. 3 weeks later, Daniel called me. Claire, we should talk. About what? The workshop. What about it? I want to sell it. My heart stopped. You can't. It's mine. Are you sure? There was silence. Then he said, the lawyer told me everything. I smiled. Did he? Yes. He sounded nervous. I know about Dad's paperwork. I said nothing. Then Daniel whispered, you found the folder, didn't you? That was when I understood. He knew. And suddenly I realized there was another layer to this. Why were you taking money from them? I asked. I wasn't stealing. I didn't say stealing. He sighed. They offered to help me. $240,000? They believed in me. No, Daniel. They were trying to save you. He became angry. You don't understand. Then explain it. His voice broke. The business wasn't really mine. I froze. What do you mean? My father was involved. My uncle. Daniel's father. He had convinced my parents to invest in Daniel's company. But the company had been failing almost from the beginning. My uncle had hidden the losses. When my father discovered the truth, he threatened to expose him. Then my uncle disappeared from the business, leaving Daniel responsible for everything. Daniel wasn't innocent. But he wasn't the mastermind either. And that made the situation more complicated. Then Daniel said something that I wasn't expecting. Your parents didn't leave me everything because they wanted to punish you. Why, then? Because they thought you were strong enough to walk away. I felt tears burn my eyes. That doesn't make it okay. I know. He paused. I'm sorry. It was the first sincere apology I'd ever heard from him. But I still had one question. Why didn't Dad tell me? Daniel answered quietly. Because he was afraid you'd spend your life trying to fix everyone again. I sat silently after the call ended. For years, I had believed my parents had chosen Daniel over me. Maybe they had. Maybe they had simply made a terrible decision while trying to protect him. Either way, I wasn't going to let their mistake destroy me. Daniel failed to meet the loan condition. The property went into a legal dispute. The documents I found forced everything into court. After months of negotiations, the estate was divided fairly. Daniel kept a portion of the property, but the workshop was sold to repay part of the outstanding debt. I didn't take the house. I didn't take Daniel's share. Instead, I used my legal settlement to start something of my own. A small woodworking studio. Dad had taught me everything I knew about tools. I kept his old workbench. I kept his silver watch. And I kept the wooden box he had left me. People sometimes ask me if I regret not fighting harder for my parents' money. I don't. Because I eventually understood something. The inheritance wasn't the house. It wasn't the bank account. It wasn't even the property my parents spent decades building. The real inheritance was the lesson they left me. I learned that being the responsible child doesn't mean carrying everyone else's mistakes. I learned that silence can hide the truth for years. And I learned that sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't taking something from the person who hurt you. It's refusing to let their choices control the rest of your life. My parents left me nothing. At least, that's what I thought when I walked into that lawyer's office. But they were wrong. They left me the truth. And once I had that, I finally stopped waiting for my family to choose me. I chose myself.